RPL, or Recognition of Prior Learning, is being widely discussed and implemented in companies and government workplaces in South Africa. In this video, we explore what RPL is and why people are interested in it. We also explore different approaches to RPL and show how to avoid the problems that have been experienced with it in other countries. Finally, we look at how you can set up RPL in your organization, providing you with the license to skill.
The recognition of prior learning recognizes learning wherever it has occurred. It can either be informally, non-formally, or formally, but doesn't matter where it has occurred. However, the requirement is that it would always be assessed through some form of formal assessment. It doesn't have to be like test or exam, but it must be some form of assessment. Now, the difference with RPL in relation to candidates who don't go through RPL is that we're assessing the outputs. In other words, we're assuming that through their experience and through their informal and non-formal learning, they have learned what they need to know in order to achieve the qualification. So we're assessing the outputs and not the inputs of the qualification.
What is RPL in your view?
RPL is recognition of prior learning, and it's a process of assessing individuals' competences, abilities, what they know that they have learned informally, but now we use the RPL process to give them a kind of a qualification in a formal way.
I think every individual through their life has gained experience, knowledge, a set of competencies and skills. And what we do is we formalize it by assessing them against a formal set of criteria that is SAQA/NQF related, so that we ensure the individuals are competent to be placed in particular jobs.
Giving qualification in terms of the RPL, it's scientific, demonstrated within an agreed parameters of when can you give a qualification, when can't you. We're talking about people that are already full-time employed in this company. We're talking people that have practiced in those environments for years. They just don't have a paper to prove what they have or what they were.
So effectively it means recognizing the learnings you bring from your history and your experience to us.
Why is your organization interested in it? What do they hope to achieve through it?
As you know, my industry is the ICT sector, and in South Africa there's a dearth of skills in IT. For me, I find for us it's critical that we actually engage in the process of recognizing prior learning, so much so that we've got a policy around it, predominantly to ensure that we're bringing in skills from the market that people have already developed over the years. So what does it mean? It means I bring in somebody with previous skills, I assess them, I make sure they're competent, I'm able to put them on the job, I cut down on the training, formal training I'll send them on, but more importantly, I get a productive individual from day one or day two.
We've just embarked in a process of talent management and deploying all the strategies that will make sure that a portion of individuals within the organization that actually makes more of our success in terms of the revenue and in terms of the portions that we need in order to continue as a business. We just continuously realize that there might be some portions within the areas that are identified where we need to recognize people for the work that they've done, and actually to be able to quantify the competence that we could say all the individuals that are operating within those areas are actually up to this level and accepted as agreed within the organization.
So in my particular industry, it's of huge value for me to be able to bring somebody in with prior learning, recognize it, qualify them, certify them, and put them on the job into productive engagements.
What concerns do people in your organization have about it?
I think traditionally there's always been a concern that people coming in with degrees are far more qualified than people who have on the street, sit-by-nearly type of training and experience. And I vehemently disagree with that, because I do believe that if somebody comes in with years and years of experience, I can put him or her on the job immediately and get value added. If I bring in a fresh graduate who's got a master's or an honours, certainly there's a settling in period, there's acclimatizing to the corporate world, there's acclimatizing to working in teams, which means my productivity outputs from him or her takes much longer.
There is a concern that if the process not properly implemented and not gone through with a reputable organization, can jeopardize it by imparting qualifications that is actually not, or does not conform to the criteria or the specific outcomes of the recognition of prior learning process.
The Institute of People Development trains and assesses OD ETD practitioners. Now that's the jargon used for all those people involved in skills development. We work with thousands of private sector companies, government departments, and many of them ask us to assist them to set up RPL systems. We believe that the first step in setting up a good RPL system in an organization is to understand and be clear on why it is that they wish to do so. We always start our projects by asking them what it is that they want to achieve and why. And here's what some of them had to say. What did you want to achieve by setting up an RPL system in your organization before you started?
But let's look strategically in terms of the wider economy, in terms of where the country is with the numbers bandied about. What we're talking about is 40,000 skills right now that are lacking in the sector, scarce skills. So if we look at it from a strategic thrust or focus point of view and map it against, as Gisa's initiatives, map it against what the presidency is talking about, we clearly have to embark on RPL initiatives. I think it's important for organizations like mine and other big IT companies to engage and embrace RPL, simply because it leads to development, or the trajectory of our economy will certainly be taken to another level, I think, at a strategic level, with such an initiative and embarking on these initiatives. So I think it's really not a nice to have anymore, it's a must have.
Whatever we're going to do internally in SETA in terms of RPL and coming to a point of quantifying, number of individuals that didn't have the paper to prove what they do have. And we came to a point where we made sure that through the process of ensuring that they can actually demonstrate the qualities and the competence that we are looking at, and it's been there quantified and a paper is being given. Actually, from the employment point of view, when they decide to leave SETA one day, the sector will still benefit around that. But at the same time, we want the benefit to be contained first at home, and that's basically what we are looking at.
What did you find most helpful about the process?
To ensure that our line managers, who are constantly crying for specific sets of skills to go out and do IT deployment, require people that we are not able to immediately get out there in the market due to the competition. And clearly, from a training and development point of view, the GM for Training and Development has embarked on this initiative to ensure that line managers can get the skills they require. We can bring people quickly into a productive realm within the environment that we are servicing. And more importantly, we can start the whole process of talent management and retention from an internal point of view as well.
Our strategy is very simple. One, we identify subject matter experts in the various environments, and then we allow them to experience the RPL process themselves, and then we take them back to the environment. They nominate individuals who can be RPL'd after being assessed to say this person and that person is at that level, and thereafter we identify a training program or intervention to close those gaps that have been identified. And those individuals then will be taken through the RPL process until they complete the entire qualification.
Some people raise various concerns about RPL. For an example, that RPL is simply giving away qualifications and that RPL candidates often lack the integrating, reflexive abilities of a true graduate. How would you respond to this?
People who come in with a set of skills that have already been developed in the work environment can get up and running quicker and hit the tar running, so to speak.
We need to come to a point where we want everyone to be acknowledging the fact that practicality, which is experience, plus a little bit of theoretical work, could actually make a complete thing.
Somebody who's had prior experience in the corporate, in the public sector without a formal qualification integrates more easily into a team, for example, integrates more easily in the work environment because they've already worked in teams, they've already had work experience, versus a graduate who comes in, who's only been in study groups and tutorials, who's been in a very formalized academic setting.
What did you want to achieve during your RPL program before you came into it?
Firstly, we needed to obtain this qualification of Education Training Development Practitioner, and as it is a requirement in our industry, And when we sourced organizations to do the qualifications through, we were introduced to the Institute of People Development and were very interested in their methodology and approach of this qualification.
I worked in the public sector for many years, and I wanted to change my career and pursue a career within the ETD industry. I realized that in order for me to be appointed within a training provider, I needed to obtain a full qualification in ODEDP.
I wanted to achieve a qualification, and my organization, which is SA Post Office, requires as a facilitator you have an ETDP Level 5 National Certificate.
I wanted my experience that I acquired informally in the workplace to be evaluated, assessed, and make a qualification if it's up to the standard.
I wanted to improve my knowledge, my skills, and I also wanted to force myself to have a challenge to understand what is this OD ETDP practitioners and the qualification all about.
What did you find most helpful about the process?
I had to do a reflexive assessment of myself and how I exactly did the role, and how I functioned. Because everything was already imprinted in my brain, I had to put it in a document format.
It was underpinned by the help that we got from our provider, which was the Institute of People Development, in attaining the qualification in terms of support, networking, as well as user support.
First of all, we were allowed to do an online admission testing. That was very helpful, not only to determine my own gaps, but also to see at what level I am with regards to ETD and all that was required if you look at the qualification. Second of all was also the library resources that you can go to via the internet. That helped me a lot, especially when I wanted to do the self-study. In future, the Occupationally Directed ETD Practices textbook will definitely help future RPL candidates to do self-study in order for them to fill their gaps.
I'm sort of bubbling over with enthusiasm in terms of I want all our trainers in our organization to actually have the qualification because I've personally benefited by improving myself, the knowledge around that, and it has made me feel more comfortable and confident knowing that I have a formal qualification in terms of education and training.
Well, all my challenges was met during this process. It was very nice for me to be able to reflect. It's easy to generate all of the evidence, but once it's in the file, to go and try to find out, so what do I know? So reflecting and trying to improve your processes the entire time.
Some people raise various concerns about RPL. For an example, that RPL is simply giving away qualifications. How would you respond to this?
Not true at all. The RPD process forces you to reflect. You really work on reflexive competence and not just generating an amount of evidence or paperwork that needs to go into a file.
To me, RPL is cost-effective, time-saving compared to a formal study training course.
I really ventured on a self-orientated learning experience for myself. That is why I can fully say that this was a challenge and definitely a life-changing experience.
What are the different ways of doing RPL that you know about?
Well, based on my experience during the time that I worked at SACWA and being responsible for the development of the RPL policy and the criteria and guidelines, and also my thesis, what emerges is there are quite a number of ways in which RPL can be done and can be undertaken. However, there are two main dominant models, which is probably used throughout the world. The one is what is known as the credit exchange model, and the other one is the developmental model. The credit exchange model is a pretty utilitarian, pretty economic use, extrinsic value associated with it, and it's very often associated with particular skills, particular parts of skills in workplaces. One of the criticisms is that it is incredibly atomistic, that it's very technicist, and that in fact it doesn't allow for any learning outside of what is prescribed or predefined in a particular standard to be allowed into the RPL process. The developmental process is a much more open process, and the learning and the experience is located within a particular context. The developmental process emphasizes not only the credit exchange, but also what the learner is actually going to get out of this and what they have actually learned through an experience or experiential learning throughout their lives.
The ways of doing RPL can be categorized into two types of approaches. The first approach is the outcomes-oriented approach, and the focus is purely on the end purpose, getting a registered qualification or a set of registered unit standards. On the other hand, we have the self-oriented approach, where the focus is not on the end goal, achieving the qualification, but the focus is very much on the process of RPL. So the process that the learner goes through in order to achieve that qualification. The self-oriented approach emphasizes the need for the learner to actually grow and develop while undergoing the RPL assessment process.
How does IPD's approach to RPL differ from that of other approaches? And what do you think about this?
Well, the IPD approach takes into account both the sort of dominant kind of approaches, the credit exchange as well as the developmental approach. And it really takes the best out of both of them. And it's probably because it's quite pragmatic to do that. Because at the one hand you have to give credit, at the other hand you want to actually achieve more out of the developmental approach than only doing credit exchange. Now, the IPD approach clearly takes on the experience of the learner much more intensely, and makes it, allows them to emerge their experience through reflection, through thinking about their own practice.
RPD's approach is different from the other providers' approach in that it marries the outcomes-oriented approach to RPL with the self-oriented approach to RPL. At the end of the day, the learners do achieve a registered qualification, but what is important is the process through which they go to reach that end point. It's a process which is rigorous and thorough and gets the learners to look at their strengths and weaknesses, look at their areas of growth. At the end of the day, they emerge as enriched with a greater understanding and renewed vision of their role as an ODETD practitioner.
Most RPL pilot projects in South Africa and abroad raised concerns about RPL and are suggesting lessons about how you may set up an RPL system and process in your organization that will support your strategic objectives and avoid the pitfalls. Let's look at some of these lessons. The 4 broad steps that are required to set up an effective RPL system can be presented in a flow diagram. Explore processes to conduct RPL with candidates. Determine RPL policies and procedures. Conduct an RPL needs audit. Design RPL support tools and practices. Judy Harris, a widely regarded RPL researcher from the University of Cape Town, identified 4 ways in which RPL is currently conducted across the world. Firstly, a challenge process is a task you may be given to establish if you can actually do the task. Secondly, there's a portfolio development where individuals explore and interrogate their experience. The third RPL process is the interactive interview. An interview alone is not usually sufficient to demonstrate all the evidence of someone's competence, but can define what other types of evidence should be provided and what assessment methods are most appropriate. Finally, there are standardized psychometric tests against various professional qualifications, including business, accounting, and medicine, as opposed to undergoing formal training programs. After considering the outlined RPL options, you should be ready to determine your RPL policy and procedures. An outline of such a policy and procedure manual, adapted from an example proposed by the State Information Technology Agency, SITA, may look as follows. Purpose and scope of policy. Legal and policy framework for RPL. RPL principles. Role players and their responsibility. Definitions. Procedures. Conducting an RPL needs audit to determine target groups, their current competencies and admission testing, online screening and streaming. Application procedure. Planning the RPL process including agreeing on program criteria and standards, determining fair, valid and reliable methods and process of assessment, support facilities and structures, certification of successful candidates, appeal procedure, review and improvement of RPL system.
The pilot educational case study concluded in 2006 demonstrated that the approach outlined to you here does have tangible benefits. Not only was it possible to take ETD practitioners through a rigorous RPL process, but it benefited the individual as well as the employer. Now for the individual, there was the development of competence as well as the ability to pursue and proceed with career path planning. The employer spent less time and money, and the formal recognition of competence allowed individuals to extend their job tasks and functions. This not only led to improved productivity, but a real sense of worth, which feeds productivity into the system.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered together today to celebrate an important event in the short history of the National Skills Development Strategy, the graduation of 60 learners with full qualifications in occupationally directed education, training and development practices. These graduates have achieved and in some cases exceeded the level of competence and skill in the field of education, training and development. Well done, ODE-ETDP graduates. Well done. Today has delivered to us as a sector, a country and a nation a new set of skills. Skills very much sought after in the education, training and development subsector. These 60 graduates have been given a new lease on life to become participants in the ETD sector. I hope that you embrace this opportunity with both hands and also go out there and become good ambassadors and cadres to the skills development revolution.